The meeting for the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation Motorcycle Safety Advisory Board has come to order. It's 10 a.m. I'm asking everyone to please mute your microphones at this time. Now, Delia is going to be calling roll. Once she announces your name, each member please turn on the microphone, answer here or present. She'll let us know if a quorum is or is not present. Delia?
Jeffrey Alford. Rowan Jude Chuck Snyder.
Here.
Kyle McNew. Mr. McNew.
Yeah, here.
Michael Manser.
Yep, here.
Commander Robert Richmond.
Present.
Rick Wyatt.
Present.
Chris Lipton.
I'm here.
Roger Bowles.
Here.
Presiding Officer Keith Rovell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Delia.
Welcome.
Right, we'll now get to the next item on the agenda, our advisory board member training. Mary Winston, the advisory board attorney, is going to give the board members training on video conferencing. Mary?
Thank you so much, Presiding Officer Rovell. Before I start, I just have to ask you, if you've ever done radio, you have
Yes.
a fantastic, I thought so.
24 years.
You know when you hear a radio announcer, I'm like, oh my gosh,
Thank you.
love your voice. So, sorry, y'all. The training. This meeting is being conducted by video conference. The public is watching via live stream, and persons who signed up to make public comment will have a chance to do so later in the meeting. And before I continue, I'm going to stop myself because I broke the first cardinal rule. I didn't say Mary Winston, TDLR. We always want to introduce ourselves before we start speaking. The meeting is being recorded and will be available on TDLR's YouTube channel. Here are some tips to make sure we have a successful meeting. Please keep your microphone muted until you'd like to speak. Please put all phones on silent and turn off any other sources of noise in your workspace. I'm a hand talker. Everyone who knows me knows I'm doing that, and it disappears behind the screen. That's distracting. So as much as possible, let's try to eliminate fidgeting in our seats because it causes the eye to go directly to you. Cardinal rule number 1, state your name before you begin speaking. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Make sure your hand is visible on your video feed. The presiding officer will call on you. Most platforms, including this one, has a raise hand feature, but the presiding officer's got a lot to do. He's running this meeting. We have folks behind the camera, folks in front of the camera, and everyone has a job. So we don't have someone specifically assigned to check the raise hand feature. So we're going to back to kindergarten and just raise our hand, and we'll be acknowledged that way. Roll call votes will be taken on any active votes during the meeting. This will eliminate confusion. If we were in person, we could see you. We would have learned voices, faces, so forth and so on. Again, Delia will take roll call. It's the easiest way whenever there's a vote that needs to be taken. You'll unmute yourself, then you'll vote and mute yourself again. If you have any problems connecting during the meeting, try to let the presiding officer know. We have staff working in the office to assist you with connectivity issues. Stay on camera during the meeting, even if you're not speaking. If you need a recess, let the presiding officer know. Again, state your name, raise your hand, and just request a recess. Make sure it's visible to the camera, and he will, I'm sure, grant that request. If you get inadvertently disconnected from the meeting, rejoin the meeting using the same link you used to join the meeting initially. We've had several of these meetings virtually now. It's still a new medium that we're using. It's a new platform. We're used to seeing everyone in person. We know that we may have a few awkward moments or minor blips along the way. No worries, we will deal with them in real time. We'll take a small recess if we need to. These issues are anticipated and they're okay. We will simply adjust. We'll go through each agenda item and we'll take care of everything today that we need to act upon. I want to thank everyone for showing up, for the trainings that you participated in, and for the service that you're doing to your field and for the citizens of Texas. Thank you all. And presiding officer, that completes my training.
Thank you, Mary. Keith Rovell, TDLR Board. Moving on now to the public comments. We did receive one public comment via email. It will not be discussed during the meeting today, but it has been given to all the board members beforehand, and nobody signed up to give public comment during this meeting. So we'll move to staff reports, our briefings from the staff and discussions on them, starting with the licensing division. Chloe Whalen, the program manager, will be giving the staff report for the licensing division. Chloe?
Good morning, Presiding Officer Rovell and board members. Welcome to TDLR. The licensing staff report that I will be giving will give you the statistic numbers of what we have as of September 1st. So active instructors that we have are 304 motorcycle instructors that was transferred from the Department of Public Safety. Off-highway vehicle instructors are 132. And since we've had the program, we've received three applications now as of yesterday, September 30th. Two for the highway vehicle instructors and one for a motorcycle instructor. And we've issued 5 orders for the MSB 8 certificate orders. And we have not received many applications thus far, but we have been doing a good job on getting these certificates out in a timely manner. And so, board members and presiding officer Rovell, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them at this moment.
Gather any questions?
I have a question, Chris, with Motorcycle Training Center.
Yes, Chris.
What's your turnaround time on MSB 8 requests till they're shipped out?
So since we are currently still working remotely, I have staff that are in the office during the week. So when we get those requests in, either by fax or email, we get those out as soon as we get the requests from the schools.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. Currently, we have 3 types of MSB 8s. Previously, under the Department of Public Safety, we had 3 types of MSB 8s. Do we still, going forward with TDL, retain the same 3 types of MSB 8s?
No, sir. The only certificates that we'll be issuing are the MSB 8s that will go out to the schools when they give those to the students.
Okay. I don't know if now's the right time to ask, but I wonder what to do for MSB 8 and MSB 8 are, we know, have forms.
I definitely can check with that. Education will probably also give you more information on those certificates as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Do we have any additional questions or comments? All right. Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. We move on now to the Customer Service Division. Jacqueline Rush, the program manager, will be given the staff report for the Customer Service Division. Jacqueline.
Good morning, board members. This is Jacqueline Rush with Customer Service. Normally, when we present these numbers that you have in front of you, what you'll be seeing is a monthly breakdown. As you can see, since we started so recently, we've provided you a daily breakdown. That's actually very unusual, but it kind of gives you an idea of how we got started off from September 1st to September 15th and the number of calls and emails that we've received. And if you have any questions on those, just let me know.
Okay, questions, comments? Jacqueline, I have a question. Will we be receiving these on a regular basis for each meeting?
You will, and normally the breakdown is going to be monthly. So you'll see how many calls and how many emails arrive in the customer service department per month.
And is there a way to find out the subject matter of these?
We can to a certain extent. And even if you're curious about the kind of calls we've received on those, I can talk a little bit about that. Just let me know. Um, but yeah, so we can give you a general idea of what people are asking.
All right. Well, I'd like to ask, what kind of calls have you gotten? The
Yeah,
subject matters.
sure. Sure. So some of these calls represent and emails represent, um, folks just checking in that were licensed under DPS and are just wanting to get the lay of the land, so to speak, help navigating through the website. There have been folks asking questions about the school application. And so, for very detailed questions, we have been connecting them with our education division, um, uh, and that kind of thing. Surprising calls that we've received only to me, not to our subject matter experts in education. We've been getting a lot of general calls that really we needed to redirect back to DPS. So folks that need to figure out how to register their moped or get a moped license. We've actually been getting several of those calls and emails. But for the most part, people are just checking in with application questions and just trying to figure out, uh, how to fill out an application correctly.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, folks? All right. Again, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board, presiding officer. Next up, Michael Strawn, the program manager, will be giving the staff report for the Education and Examination Division. Michael?
Good morning, Presiding Officer Ravel and members. Michael Strawn, Education Examination Division, and I'm one of the managers there. Today, we have our staff report from E&E, and our statistics are a small snapshot since September 1st. So you'll see that we currently have 0 school applications at this time. As you heard from customer service, we have had some inquiries. The applications are on our website. Officially, though, we had not received one at the time of the report. We did have one school that was in process of a change of ownership from DPS, but that was put on hold at DPS, came over to us, and we have processed that change in ownership at this point in time. So everything seems to be running well there. But as you heard from customer service, we have been getting calls about it, and we are assisting them and processing those applications as soon as we get it. And I fully expect that this time during our next report, you'll see some of those statistics definitely coming up. Our current projects, we have an ongoing project, which is maintenance and updates to our website. In September 1st, we launched the motorcycle website, and we continue to add features, search tools, licensing validation to the website at this point in time. We had recently added an instructor and a school search function, along with a map that will show all of the schools that are licensed with us throughout the state, so people can go to it and easily identify a school in their area and select from it. So we're very happy about that. And we continue to push out updates for the website to make sure that it's readable, friendly, and all of the information that anybody is seeking is there. We work hand in hand with our customer service division to make sure that that information on there is pertinent and accessible, so that it reduces those phone calls. Next, we are still in an ongoing process of learning and updating our processes through RIMS. We are our project is to eventually migrate completely out of RIMS as we move forward. Our timeline is hopefully looking like sometime spring of next year. We've currently removed the instructor portion out of RIMS at this time. We are going to continue to phase everything slowly out of RIMS as we move forward. But at this point, and we will, of course, keep everybody aware of all of that through our listserv and through public outreach as we move forward on migration out of RIMS. But we are phasing that out. It is coming into our own licensing database at this point in time, and that will be an ongoing project for the interim. One of the last projects we have to update you all on is right before this project launched, right before September 1st, our team had set up several meetings with schools, curriculum providers, instructors throughout the state. I'm trying to reach out to as many people as we could to give a what we call a motorcycle overview for a welcome to TDLR overview. And it showed all of the things that stayed the same within the law and rules, the things that people should expect to change, how certain things were going to be processed and handled here at the department. And we received great feedback from everybody on that, and actually received a ton of input and knowledge, and it was really an excellent thing and something that we were always looking forward to, and really shows the values that TDLR has in our teamwork, our communication and outreach, and the level of feedback we got from the industry was outstanding. The information we got, it's made us better. So we look forward to continuing doing those outreach efforts and building those relationships with you all as we move forward. That concludes my report, and I'm open for any questions you all have at this time.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Rick.
Rick Wyatt, TDLR industry rep. Couple of questions. First, on the RIMS database, the instructor reports, will the data that the that showed for the instructors be transferred over as well? Mainly because this is used for the coaches or / instructors to recertify through MSF, meaning they need to know how many courses, which courses they taught.
Michael Strawn, TDLR. That's a great question, and absolutely, everything that is in RIMS, we have access to. We've already done data extracts of the entire RIMS file. Our IT team has at this time, and as we move forward and continue to phase portions out of it, we will always migrate that data out. We certainly don't want to lose any historical data, any information at all, because it does become relevant for either licensing, school audits, whatever it may be. That we don't want to lose any of that history.
Next question. Have the coaches been notified? Personally, myself, I just did a recent RIM search and noticed I had some issues trying to get into my account. So I don't know if there was a email blast or notification to all the coaches through Texas to let them know that this is in process. Regarding
the specificity of the instructor portion of RIMS being turned off, we did not do an individual email blast out to the industry for that. We did put it into the outreach efforts, the meetings with the schools, the providers, and the instructors that we were able to meet with before launch. We're happy to reiterate and get that information out to everybody if it's something that is needed. Absolutely.
Yeah, I believe email blast might actually work as well. We were used to it from DPS. And last question on the TDLR page for license search. How does the instructor search? Do we already have our number? What numbers are we using, or how do we find what our certification license slat is?
From my understanding, without going to look at it right now, everybody was brought over using their RIMS number. Once upon your first license renewal with TDLR, you will receive a TDLR number. Until then, you're utilizing your RIMS number. Thanks, sir.
Keith Rovell, our advisory board. Michael, just a question about the new database that you all are building to take RIM's place. What input are you getting on that in regards to what is needed in that?
My apologies. You broke up a little bit. I didn't hear your full question. Heard some background noise.
Okay, what I was asking is what.
I'm sorry, Mr. Presiding Officer, if Mr. Wyatt, I think we're getting that background from you. Thank you so much. Okay, thanks.
There we go. No, I simply had a question regarding the new database system that is being built to replace REMS. Will input be sought with the providers and instructors regarding what needs to be included in that?
At this time, we have not sought outside influence for development of our licensing database. Inherently, we have not. Anytime that we're developing our licensing database, it's usually our information. Certainly, if there's something that we needed more information on, if we needed assistance to understand the pertinence of something, we would certainly reach out to the industry to understand that. But with most of our licensing within it, it's fairly we try to standardize most of our industries as far as what we're capturing for license renewal, license application, school locations, and range information.
Thank you. Any other?
Mary
Mary.
Winston, TDLR. I just want to add, and thank you so much, Ford, that we are not trying to recreate the wheel with the new licensing system. So as we brought everyone over with all of your information, we'll pull from that internally. We're just so thankful to have this new system because the staff has been operating over 9 systems because we get a new program, we incorporate their system. The systems don't talk to each other. I can't make it more technical than that because I don't understand more than that. So whatever we get, it's just to kind of bring in one system of information. However, if we need input, we always do reach out. If we do, we have standardized input that we actually got in from DPS when you came over. If there's more that needs to be done, we'll do that. But this whole new system is really just to incorporate all those pieces of the 9 systems so we can have it all together, and it's kind of less work for everyone. That's just kind of, we're doing double work on different licensing systems. We have to, for this license, go into that system, this license go into the other system. So it'll just make it easier for us, which is better for the public. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other comments, questions?
I have one, Keith.
Yes, please.
Chris Litvin from the TDLR Advisory Board, Motorcycle Training Center. Michael, I'd just like to say, so far what I see looks really good. I really like your map with sites. It's we've had several iterations in the past, and this one seems the most intuitive and the most useful. And I understand what you're saying, Mary. But this tool that you're creating is you're migrating off of a tool that rider coaches and schools and sponsors used on a daily or monthly basis to do the things that we needed to do with the Texas government and with the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. And you're giving us a new tool that I hope and expect will be better. But if you don't fully understand how we're going to make use of the tool before you implement it, that could cause some problems on the other side of the fence, on the outside of TDLR. So, and it seems like this is a perfect example of what the advisory board is here for. So, I mean, we don't want to place other requirements on you, but we would be glad to give you some input at the design stage before you implement it and have to rework it if there's something that's left out that could have been easily included so that it's useful for in both directions. Thank you.
Mary Winston, TDLR, thank you so much for volunteering for that. That's what we have here.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I am volunteering for it. Use me as a resource. Thank you.
Awesome. So yes, we will reach out to advisory board members for just various needs from the industry. So it's kind of like a blanket reach out that we have for you. So if we need whatever, we appreciate, Chris, you jumping in. I know the rest of the members are interested as well. I don't know how to do the technical side. I don't. But as we move forward and we have questions, I think we have some names at the top of the list. And yes, we want to make sure that it's reaching everyone, and we'll be testing before we get this launched. We'll be doing all this kind of testing. So we'll have a lot of involvement there. Thank you so much for volunteering.
Sure. I've been doing the motorcycle thing as a sponsor since 2005, and before that for 10 years I was a software developer. So it might be a good resource for you. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Presiding officer, I have a question.
All right. Keith Ravel, TDLR Advisory Board. Next up.
Presiding officer, I have a quick question.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff Alford, Advisory Board. I have a question for Ford. We had reached out and we're talking about a couple of different things about not only bringing new instructors on, but new to Texas instructors, being that we have a national certification and we also have a state certification. Also in that, we also have internal certifications like your 8-to-1 certification and your additional curriculums that we've previously had to attend additional training to get to. How are we handling that going forward?
Michael Strong, TDLR. Excellent question, Mr. Alford. I don't want to step too much on General Counsel's toes on this, but and kind of what Mary said, this is why you all are here. This is our first advisory board. Historically, when we're looking at reciprocity, when we're looking at rule requirements that we're doing, we break out into work groups with you all, get feedback from you all, the industry, on what we're doing in the rule packages that we're putting forward. We are very much in talks with our general counsel about some of these things that you brought up, the 8-to-1, 6-to-1 ratios, everything else that's there. And so, this is our kickoff meeting here. We're very excited to be working with you all, and we know that we still have work to do. And we know that that work is going to be hand in hand with our advisory board members, our industry, as we move forward. We rely on our industry experts out there. You all are those industry experts, and we do utilize those resources to make sure that we get it as right as we can.
Thank you.
Sir.
Okay, any additional comments, questions? All right, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. We will move on now to the Enforcement Division. And I'd like to introduce John Medlock, the lead attorney, giving the staff report for the Enforcement Division.
Thank you. Again, my name is John Medlock. I'm the chief prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the Enforcement Division does. Basically, we're responsible for all the cases and complaints that come in and investigating those cases and then coming up with the decision in those cases. In the Enforcement Division, we've got investigators, attorneys, and legal assistants. And the way that we've broken down our Enforcement Division, it kind of mirrors what the life cycle of a case is. So we've got our Intake Division. They have legal assistants in that. And so all the cases typically come into our Intake Division. Intake, essentially what they do is they'll ask a couple of different questions. One, is this a case or program that we regulate? Sometimes we'll get complaints for areas currently, sometimes because we regulate air conditioning contractors, but we'll also get plumbing complaints. We don't regulate plumbing, so we kick those over to the plumbing board. So that's the first question they ask. Is this a program that we regulate? And right now, there's about 41 of them that we regulate, so it's quite a bit that comes in. Then the next question they ask is they take a look at our laws and rules and they ask the question, does the complaint allege that there's a violation or a potential violation of one of those laws and rules? If that's the case, then our intake will open up a case. The case will then move over to our investigation section. We'll have an investigator assigned to that case, and essentially the investigator does all the things that you think that they would do. They'll interview the witnesses, they'll procure any documents that need to be procured. If it's a case that involves experts, they'll seek out experts to review the case and get an expert opinion. But essentially that's what they do. They collect the facts in the case, and then they move that case, they write a report, and then they'll move that case over to the prosecution section. Now, in the prosecution section, there are currently 17 attorneys, and we're also broken into teams. This program is slotted into what we call our transportation team. In the transportation team, we have towing and vehicle storage facilities, the transportation networking companies, driver's education safety, now the new fuel metering and quality program that's come over. So you guys are slotted in with them. We've currently got 3 attorneys that work those cases. Jaime Aribia, who will typically be given this enforcement report to you guys at the enforcement at y'all's advisory board meetings, Michael Shirk, and also Tony Reed. Their job is to review those cases as they come in and determine what to do with it. Some of the cases will not be sufficient evidence. And so therefore we're going to close that case. Some cases there might be what we call evidence that there was a violation that occurred, but there may be some kind of a mitigation that happened, maybe a customer refund, maybe they, for whatever reason, the parties came together and they came to a resolution. So we can either issue a warning saying, hey, there was a violation, but you've corrected it. But at the same time, we could also informally close that saying that you guys have come to some sort of resolution. Kind of the third thing that we can do with a case is if we determine that there's violations that have been alleged that warrant a penalty to be issued, we'll go ahead and draft what we call a notice of alleged violation. That will basically put the respondent on notice of that we're saying that you've alleged a violation and that we're going to assess an administrative penalty and or a sanction. When we do that, that gives the respondent an opportunity to request a hearing before the State Office of Administrative Hearings. We'll prep that case, take it to the hearing. The State Office of Administration hearing, it'll be like a trial before an administrative law judge. The only difference is there are no juries. It's just right there before the administrative law judge. We'll have the hearing. The administrative law judge will create what they call a proposal for decision, basically kind of saying, based on the evidence that I've heard and seen and the testimony that was received, this is how I think the case should happen. Essentially, the ALJ will give a proposal for decision that says one of essentially three things. State, we think you carried your burden, and we think that the penalty that you're and the sanction that you're assessing is appropriate. State, we think you carried your burden, but we don't think that the penalty and or sanction are appropriate, so we're going to lower it. Or the last thing they can do is state, we don't think you carried your burden at all. Now, once that decision comes out, then those will go in front of our commission, and the respondent kind of what I call gets a second bite of the apple, and they'll get to present that case kind of in a Reader's Digest version of that to the commission, and a final decision will be made there. Now, kind of taking a step back a little bit, the complaints that I say that our intake division handles, they kind of come in from one of three different ways. Consumer complaints. The bulk of our cases that come into us in the enforcement division come in from consumer complaints. These are members of the public that have dealt with licensees or people who are purporting to be licensees, and something has gone wrong. So they'll file a complaint with us. They can file it online. They can fax it, sometimes call, send it in by mail. We'll take those all in, and again, the intake division sorts those out and gets those over to the investigation. We also have departmental complaints. We have a whole division, and you'll hear from them, the Field and Inspections Division, because some of our programs have inspection components where we'll have dedicated staff to go out and do periodic inspections of some of our different entities. And then they'll write up reports, and then they'll send those over to us through the intake division to open up those cases and prosecute those cases as we see fit. The last kind of bulk of cases are criminal history cases. Now, what I mean by that is all of our licensees, when they either apply for a new license or try to renew their license, they're subject to a criminal history background check. We've got two attorneys that are dedicated to those types of cases. The first kind of stage is our licensing division will take a look at some of those and compare them to our criminal guidelines. I'll get to that here in just a second, and see if any of those kind of cases match or any of that kind of criminal history matches on that applicant or that licensee. And if they get a hit, they'll send that over to the enforcement division, and those attorneys will review that case, maybe seek further criminal history information, and then they'll have a case. Those cases, what we typically seek to do is either deny the application or revoke the license because we don't think that the licensee is fit for licensure or the applicant is fit for licensure. So kind of what the prosecutors use. So we've got a couple of different things that we use when we're reviewing cases. Obviously, what's in the case file, what the investigator has found as far as evidence and the different witness statements. But we also use our complaint resolution manual. So it kind of gives the prosecutor kind of a step-by-step guide of how the cases are flow and how cases should be handled. When I talked about that notice of alleged violation, each program will have what we call a separate penalty matrix, which is a part of our enforcement plan. Now, our penalty matrix is basically a recitation of all the potential violations that could happen in this particular program. And what we do is we classify them by class. The typical way we do it is Class A being the less serious type cases, and then Class D being our most serious and most egregious cases. And within each of those classifications, we try to group like violations. So if we have a whole bunch of record keeping type violations, we try to group those all together in one class. If we have a lot of fraud or intentional conduct, bad conduct, we'll try to group those together. And again, Class A being the less serious, typically low penalties in that. Class D is usually kind of their higher end. Within the enforcement plan, we are authorized to up to a $5,000 penalty per violation. So within those Class A to Class D ranges, you'll see a different range. Class A being less severe, Class B being a little bit more, C, and then finally D. And within those, as it gets more severe, you'll also start seeing the inclusion of sanctions. Those sanctions could be anywhere from a probated suspension, where we basically say your license is suspended, but we're going to probate that suspension for a period of time so you can still practice in your profession, up to a full suspension where you still have your license, but we suspended you from participating in that occupation for a period of time, all the way up to a revocation. Now, revocation is the most severe, and with it comes a 1-year sit-out period from the date of that revocation. Then also, like I talked about the criminal conviction guidelines, we try to group things that are important and things that we don't want in this industry. We kind of have an initial draft of the criminal conviction guidelines. And one of the things that we do in the enforcement division is we get members from the different advisory boards and smaller, what we call work groups, and we'll get together and we'll say, hey, look, here's our first draft of these criminal conviction guidelines. This is what we think are the crimes that you guys don't want in your industry. Different programs have different crimes that are serious to them. Whereas some drug offenses are more serious in some of our, like the cosmetology and our health profession type programs. They're not necessarily that as important in our ACR or our air conditioning or our electrical divisions. So it just kind of depends on what your program is and what's important. DWI is also is obviously very important to a tow truck driver because they're driving cars around. Not necessarily so important to an air conditioning contractor. So as you can see, it's not a one-size-fits-all on these criminal conviction guidelines. And with the enforcement plan and the development of that penalty matrix, as I said, we'll get that same work group together and we'll try to we'll take a pass at it the first time, but we'll get you guys' input to say, hey, look, is this right? Should these violations be in this category? Because you guys are the experts in the industry. You guys have seen what has happened with the previous administration of this program, and we want y'all's input in that document. So those will be a couple of things that we'll be reaching out to you guys in the future as we develop them to try to get those so we can implement them. So the prosecutors, when we do get cases, have that framework in which they can keep consistent, like violations consistently across the program. So now for update. Again, my name is John Mellock, and I was promoted to the chief prosecutor. I've been working at TDLR for about 7 years. I started working as just a regular prosecutor on the what we call our building and mechanical programs, which is our ACR, our air conditioning, and our electrical type programs. Then I was promoted to senior prosecutor and now chief. On May 1st, Trevor Thielen was promoted to a senior prosecutor. He's worked at TDLR for about 9 years. In February, Jackie Revilla was promoted to a legal assistant supervisor. She has actually since then been promoted to our legal assistant manager because, as I'll mention here in a little bit, our legal assistant manager, Daryl Coons, did retire at the end of our fiscal year, which ends at the end of August. Debbie Hawkins was also promoted to a legal assistant supervisor, and Debbie's worked with us for about 8 years. A few retirements that we have was a lot of knowledge and a lot of talent that has retired, but it is well well-earned retirements for the next few people is our investigations manager, Greg Dawson, has retired after 22 years of service with TDLR. So he was the manager over our investigators, and he had about 42 investigators, and so we definitely wish him well. And like I just said, Daryl Coons, he's retired after 18 years of service with TDLR. He was running our prosecution legal assistants, and he had about 33 legal assistants in which he oversaw. And then finally, one of our senior investigators, Esmer Arguijo, retired after 21 years of service with TDLR. She worked a lot of the building mechanical, some well water, and some property tax cases. So we sorely miss them, but they were retirements well earned. And one thing I just want to say about this report going forward, it's not going to be like this. What you're going to see going forward is a bunch of statistics, enforcement statistics, not just for your program, but also for TDLR as a whole. You'll see violations, kind of like a laundry list of the violations that are at opening when the complaints come in, because it might open up as one type of violation, that's not maybe what it ends up being prosecuted as, because as the investigation process goes, we might find some additional things, or we might find something completely different. And so you'll see not only the violations that were at opening, but the disciplinary violations that we've taken. You'll see the percent of the cases that are criminal history versus departmental versus complaint. Then the other thing that we'll be doing is we'll kind of give you some snapshots of some orders that we've had. So one of the things that we can do is, like I told you about the SOA process, but we also have agreed orders and we also have default orders. Now, quickly, an agreed order is once we've sent that NOAV, the respondent goes, you know what, I did it, and I'll come to some sort of agreement. And so we'll reduce that settlement agreement down to an agreed order that our executive director, Brian Francis, will sign off on. If after we send out that NOAV, we get no response back from the respondent, we'll end up reducing that down to a default order. So we'll just give you a little bit of a snapshot of those different types of orders, whether it be a commission order that went through the whole contested case process, whether it was a settlement agreement that got reduced to an agreed order, or one where we had no response after our notice of alleged violation and it got reduced down to a default order. So you can be looking, those are some things to kind of preview that you guys can be looking for going in the forward. And if you guys, when you see the report, if there's something you think is missing or something that you would like to be added, feel free to let us know. I mean, we're always willing to get the information that you guys want to see. We do try to standardize it across all of our different advisory boards, but some advisory boards like more statistics, some advisory boards like a few more cases. So it's however you guys are looking at it and want to see it, we can tailor it to those needs. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. Any questions, any comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
I do have a question, Keith.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Rick White, TDLR Industry Advisor. Question on any sanctions or anything that were previously existing before is DPS switched over to TDLR. Is there a process notification? Has that been much?
Well, if there are any open, typically when the cases come over, we do get some of the information if there are any open cases that were currently at the old agency. I would have to get with our management analyst, Chris Rusty, to see if any of that process has taken place yet. But we can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, other
Chris
comments?
Rusty, I can chime in and answer that if you'd like, John.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Chris Rusty, Management Analyst, Enforcement Division. So when this program transferred over, we were informed there were no open cases at the time of transfer, as well as sanctions, as you referred to. It depends if it was, are you referring to like an open payment plan or if there were terms to a sanction that were needed to be required?
Probated suspension, something of that nature.
Yes, so we will get those types of sanctions. And if there is any kind of term to a probated suspension or suspension, we will enforce those that were implemented through a final order.
that answers it.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions, comments?
Presiding officer, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jeff Alford, board member. The rules and regulations that are going to go into effect, where will they be posted for all to be able to be on the same page once they're developed?
So those will be each of our programs has their own page within the TDLR website. So on the right hand side, usually there's like a whole section for laws, rules, and even that penalty matrix that I talked about. There'll be links for all that on this particular program's page.
Okay. Jeff, did that answer your question?
Yes, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Rick, go ahead.
Mr. Rovell, before we move on, Rick White, TDLR Industry Advisory, would like to request a short 5-minute recess if possible.
Do we have any objections?
We have a second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed to a recess? All right. We will take then, with everyone's permission, a short 5-minute recess and be right back. Keith Ravel, presiding officer, TDLR Advisory Board. Time it's 10:53, and we are back from break at this point. The next item on the agenda will be for David Gonzalez, the Deputy Executive Director, to give the Executive Office report. David?
So, good morning. I'm David Gonzalez, graduate of Texas A&M University. I've been with the agency for 24 years. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Licensing Services. I'm one of 3 DEDS, Deputy Executive Directors, providing Brian Francis some executive support in the administration of our 40 programs here at TDLR. I'm also the designated Executive Office Liaison for this program. So I look forward to getting to know y'all all better and working with all of you. Officer Ravel and board members, I know this is a big deal for us because it's the inaugural meeting. We did get to see you a few months ago in February for the summit to get to know y'all and get y'all to hear about some of our processes. But I just want to tell you how important, and Mary and Ford alluded to it earlier, the feedback from these advisory boards has been critical to our success. For our strategic planning, for the things that we do on a daily basis, we need that feedback. So I want to thank you in advance for the volunteer service. A lot has happened since February. The rest of the nation, the world, in regards to COVID, we've all been kind of learning as we go. So I'm giving the report, the executive report on COVID-19 response. And I'm just going to share with you that the safety of our staff and the public that we serve has been paramount in our thoughts. It's hard to compile 7 months into just a few minutes of time. I'm going to try, but 7 months of 2020 is pretty spectacular. In fact, infamous in some instances. But we can divide it into 2 categories. We've got an external response and basically our responsibility to the public. If I wanted to summarize it in a word, we've been the conduit, using one of our electrician program terminology, the conduit of information for the feds, the CDC, the state governor's office, DSHS, even the local governmental jurisdictions, county and citywide mandates. We've tried to take all that information that they've put out, filter it, put it on our website, and push it out to our licensing programs, each one having their own different aspects and different effects, and help them to make sense of it, just as we're reviewing it, trying to make sense of it ourselves, because this thing has been a moving target. Doing all we can to review the recommendations and the directives of the governor's office and the plans to reopen Texas. We did things from each division, different kind of responses, like halting our inspections, investigations. We halted our outreach efforts that we usually do with our RPM division, which is to go out and do industry association meetings. We couldn't do as much because of COVID, obviously. We did things like requesting some authority to waive CE requirements for some of our programs, actually going to the governor's office and making those requests. As we heard from our industry members and or identified ourselves where there was some need or some difficulty that was being encountered by our program staff or by our program public. Examinations is a big deal of what we do as well, a big part of it. And so having practical examinations and people to show up at practical examination places, something we had to stop as well. So all of our staff are working behind the scenes while COVID is going on, trying to figure out how they're going to populate and help do all these things. Those are the kind of things we do externally to help with our 40 programs. Internally, I'm just going to tell you, we have not been immune to the COVID-19. It has affected some of our staff personally. We have had people contracted. We've had to go through the processes of sanitizing entire floors. We've gone through the taking temperature, people checking in. All those things are things we've had to deal with, even though we had established early on that we were going to have everybody that could work from home. That was the initiative that our executive office started from the beginning, everybody being at home if your job was conducive to getting the work done from home. Not everybody's job was like that. In particular, our mailroom, our finance, our licensing division staff have all that mail coming in. So we had staff and have continued to show up to this day in the office, usually on rotations, maintaining social distancing. We provide all the PPE, but those are the things that make it more difficult to do our job because we're trying to take care of our staff and still take care of the workload that we're used to taking care of. I want to give a big shout out to our IT division. None of this gets done without our IT division being able to set us up with these virtual meetings, with laptops and communications that work successfully for these WebEx. We're learning as we go. Sometimes there's technical glitches, but so far we've had a good response from our public and in these meetings that we're still able to get our job done. Sometimes overlooked, but most important, our HR division, which is fielding questions regarding how do I take care of my kid who's going to school while on the job. And we have to work through those situations and make sure that we can accommodate, but we need the work done. And so we've had to accommodate with hours and extended hours and even working on weekends sometimes to make sure that the work is getting done. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act, our HR division fielding questions related to all those things as well. It's been a big deal. It's been very difficult. And we've got in place right now a return to office transition plan on how we're going to be moving back to the office. We've got about 25% in the office right now, increasing it closer to 50% depending on which division and program you're looking at that they're working on. But again, the mailroom, finance, and licensing are probably the most prominent feature of having to go in because their jobs actually require handling mail and reviewing applications in person. I want to make sure to reiterate, even though we're at home, the work is going on. We've been very productive, and I'm just so proud of our staff. I want to compliment them on the record for the things that they've been able to get done, including implementation of new programs like FMQ and motorcycles program. These are things that had to be done. Luckily, we got our February summit in just before the COVID hit, but we've been having to do a lot of this work remotely, and it does present a challenge. Those are the things I wanted to convey. If there's any questions related to COVID-19, I'll be glad to answer them. All right. With your permission, I'll move on to strategic plan. So strategic planning is a state mandated process. Every agency is required to do this every 2 years. Our agency takes it pretty seriously. And in the past, we've been able to travel the state, gathering input, asking questions like, what statute or rule would you change if you were king or queen for a day? What can we do better? What can we improve on? These are things that we took seriously, and we use that information to incorporate into our strategic plan. The public, every individual that showed up or went to our website and provided input, their thoughts and ideas, you're going to see them in our strategic plan. Our boss, Mr. Francis, is actually very competitive, so we do a lot of sports analogies at our agency. If you were going to make a comparison of what the strat plan is for us, it's our game plan. If you wanted to know what our agency is doing, what our direction is every 2 years, you're going to go to our website, you're going to go to our agency reports, and you're going to read through that strat plan because it makes reference to the commission that helps guide us. It makes reference to the advisory boards. It actually gives you all of our targets and focus and goals that we're going to have for the next coming years. And it actually aids us in planning for the legislative sessions to the ideas. Most of the ideas that we come up with, they're not ours. They come from the public. And those ideas get incorporated into the strat plan as part of our legislative appropriations request or our legislative queries that we could do to, if the legislators ask us if there's things we need help with, we're able to provide them with, well, this is what the public is saying, and these are the difficulties we're having. So if you get a chance on our website under agency reports, strat plan is going to give you a great overview of what we got planned for the next 2 years. If there's no questions related to that, I'll move on to the Sunset Commission review and response. All right, so another state mandated process is Sunset Review. Every state agency goes through it. Usually it's every 7 years. Because of the growth of our agency and a lot of programs coming to us as part of their Sunset reviews, our Sunset got delayed quite a few years. It was unfortunate actually because the Sunset process is a process of review that has people from the outside looking over at a granular level all the things that you do, and they give you pointers. It's not a love fest. They're trying to find things that we could do better, that we're doing wrong, and that we need to improve on. They're looking to see if a program needs to continue. Some major things, very smart people with very analytical minds getting into our processes. They started last year. They finished their report in June and issued it. It is a recommendation. It is their report. Some of their report includes things like doing away with programs or combining programs. Some of their report has management actions that they would like for us to enact, and we're responsible for reviewing those recommendations. And if those recommendations actually get put into legislation, they become mandated for us. The June 4th report, we were able to provide an executive response. So if you wanted to go to the Sunset Commission's website, you can actually see that report. You can see our executive director's response to it, basically acknowledging the points that they brought up, the issues that they found, and the things that we agree we can improve on, or the things that we think we're doing right, but maybe we didn't communicate it as well as we needed to. These things you can also read all the comments that have been received since that June 4th report was released. We were actually scheduled to have our hearing, which is the hearing that goes before the contention of senators and representatives to see the recommendations and decide if they want to move forward with all or some or none of them. That hearing was postponed because obviously COVID. How do we get everybody together? How do we listen to everybody that wants to speak on our 40 programs? So they had a challenge. The Sunset Commission had a challenge trying to coordinate that. They recently did have their meetings with some other agencies. So if you wanted to see that, you could actually go to the Texas House of Representatives and see how that process worked, because we will be having, to my knowledge, we still don't have a date set, but we will be having our hearing on our Sunset Commission report. And that's significant for y'all because whatever they tell us to do will affect how we do business with the rest of our programs and our agency. It's important. So I would encourage you to do that. We're actually very proud of our report. Again, they're not giving compliments and kudos in these reports. They're trying to find things wrong, but everything that they put in the report, we had to acknowledge that, again, smart people telling us things that we can do better. We've got one of our deputy executive directors, Christina Kaiser, has actually been the lead on addressing management actions even before the Sunset Commission hearings happen, because these are things we can take care of right away. If it's a good idea or something that we've been thinking about doing but hadn't had a chance to initiate, we're taking that opportunity, and she's already made progress on that. So very proud of what we've been able to accomplish with the Sunset report and where we're at. These are recommendations. And so the hearings are going to be quite important. If you're interested, you can actually, not sure how they're going to do the hearings and if there's going to be virtual testimony or if they're going to take it all in writing, but keep apprised of it. Usually we'll have something on our website giving that notice out to all of our programs so that they can keep tabs on what's going on with the agency. Any questions related to Sunset? All right, so communication outreach statistics. Let me get to my sheet that shows me my stats. So every web page we put out for our programs, we kind of take pride in the information we put out there simply because it is the easiest way to get information out to our public that we serve. Over the past 14 days, we haven't had motorcycles too long, but over the past 14 days, the Motorcycle and Off-Highway Vehicle Safety website has had 8,772 views. That's quite a bit for that short time period. So 549 hits per day going to that page, trying to see what's going on with their program. Jacqueline from customer service alluded to it earlier. In the implementation of a new program, the questions can come from everywhere. They can be all over the place. A lot of it has to do with just gaining a general overview of the agency and how we work. With this particular program, 55% of the visitors that accessed our site did it from a desktop computer, 42% from a smartphone, hopefully not while on their motorcycle or ATV, and 3% from a tablet. The top 10 reasons for visiting our site have been proposed rules, forms and publications, program transfer FAQs, order course completion certificates, and advisory board. So all those things are things that we put out for the information of the public. If there's more that we can add, and Chris, I really appreciate you stepping up. As Mary said, you volunteered because you asked the question. I'm actually the lead on the initiative to incorporate a new licensing program at TDLR. We were fortunate enough to get finance and the legislation appropriation request for the first phase of a new licensing system for our entire agency, because we've got, as Miss Mary said, 9 disparate programs. We do want your feedback. We will at some point be able to incorporate that. Right now we're wrestling with those old 9 systems, trying to get some standardization, but your feedback will be asked, and I'll probably end up giving you a phone call after the meeting or later this week, because these are things that happen timely, make it easier for the programming and thinking about these things early on. That's all I have to share on the executive report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. David, you've been busy. Wow. Holy moly.
The agency staff deserve all the credit. Brian Francis used to shoulder a lot of this responsibility, but he'll actually have our chairman Figueroa from the chair of our commission. He'll say that we make him look good, and it's because he allows us time to help now. Mike Otis-Mendez, who used to be the chair of our commission, he has joined us as a deputy executive director. So he's over the finance, I'm over the licensing section of service and licensing and education examination. And then Christina has enforcement and the regulatory program management and field operations. So we divide the workload, but you're right. We've been busy. We like staying that way. And despite the pandemic, we've got our hands in a lot of pies. We're going to keep it going as long as we can.
Fantastic. Anybody have any questions, comments for David? All right. We'll move on. The next item on the agenda is the consultation on the proposal to contract with Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service, TEAX, to administer the instructor training program. Derek Burke, the Assistant General Counsel, will present the agenda item.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Derek Burkhalter, and I am the Assistant General Counsel for TDLR assigned to this program. For this agenda item, we are consulting with you on the proposal to contract with the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service, which we'll call TEAX for brevity, to administer the instructor training program as required by Chapter 662 of the Texas Transportation Code. Now, before we begin the discussion, I need to address some preliminary matters. As you know, New is designated to represent TEAX on this advisory board, and this discussion concerns a proposed contract with TEAX. However, because the agenda item is only a consultation and the board will not be voting or taking any action on this item, Mr. McNew will be able to participate in the discussion with the understanding that his comments will be made and will be received by the department only in his capacity as a representative of TEAX, not in his capacity as a member of the advisory board. During the discussion, the department will not be advocating for or against any position concerning the proposal. Our role here is to seek feedback from you as the experts in your field, and we place a high value on your input. Now, you should find the document containing TEAX's proposal. I believe it's on page 9 of your meeting materials. And Mr. Presiding Officer, I'll turn the floor over to you to recognize anyone, including yourself, who wishes to comment on the proposal.
Keith Rovell, Presiding Officer, TDLR Advisory Board. Folks, comments, questions do you have about the statement of work at this time? Have you all had a chance to read it? Yes, Jude.
Well, I've read over the statement of work, Keith, and I'll tell you, it causes me some great concerns, and that's cleaning it up as much as I possibly can. I was privy to many conversations with Senator Watson when we were discussing moving the motorcycle safety program out of DPS over to TDLR. There were two main reasons to do this. First off was DPS historically has been very capricious in the way it was expending dedicated motorcycle safety funds, General Revenue 501 money. Historically, they spent funding for many items that were not related at all to motorcycle safety. But equally as important was the DPS motorcycle safety units failure to give sponsors, the training entities, the instructors, or the riders an opportunity to talk about or discuss with them any changes they might make to the program. And if I understand this statement of work, we're looking at basically scrapping the entire program in favor of going to one Texas-based curriculum when we have 2 curriculums available for review that have an entire suite of courses tailored not just for basic, but also intermediate and advanced rider training. Anybody who's been riding motorcycles for a while, or anybody who's been instructor for a while, understands that motorcycle riding should be a lifelong learning opportunity. The basic rider courses are available now. Give you just that. They give you basic skill sets. It takes that intermediate and advanced riding opportunities and training to make you an exceptional rider and make you a safer rider. My fear is that we're going away from something that's proven to save lives to just some basic rider training that who knows is going to build this curriculum and what their qualifications are going to be. And this will ultimately cost lives. Not even to mention the boondoggle of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to scrap a program for something that's not as effective. I have just some serious concerns about this, and as a rider rep for this advisory board, I can tell you the rider community will not be impressed at all with this. And historically, during legislative day, they go visit with all their legislators about everything they're concerned about. And I can assure you, if this moves forward, this will be a concern that goes to all the legislators. And I yield my time, sir.
Thank you, Jude. Yes, Chris.
Thank you. Chris Litfin, Motorcycle Training Center Advisory Board member. I have several concerns too. In the past, currently, we have a shortage of rider coaches. We need more rider coaches. In the past, under DPS, rider coach training has not been as available as it was further in the past. Courses for rider coach instructor training and certification haven't been as available as I'd like them to be, as often as I'd like them to be, or in locations where I'd like them to be. In addition to that, it's been difficult to get into the classes. You have to register and complete several requirements months and months before the training. And then you do all that, you jump through those hoops, and then at the time the training comes, you find out not enough participants have signed up for the course and it's canceled. This is very discouraging to rider coach candidates. And another issue I have is this is a monopoly. If we have a curriculum like the Motorcycle Safety Foundation Basic Rider course or the Total Control 3-wheel course, those curriculum providers provide training certification for instructors. That's and if you think about it theoretically, if you have a curriculum, who would be best qualified to certify instructors than the providers and the creators of the curriculum? They know the curriculum. They know what the instructors need to know to teach the curriculum effectively. They're the ones who wrote the curriculum. So I'm not totally opposed to Texas adding some additional things onto the training that the curriculum provider provides, but I think we should really have some restraint in that. I mean, like I said, who better to create the training for instructors than the curriculum providers, the curriculum creators? They're the ones that created the curriculum. So I'm not opposed to having training available in Texas or having that be a superset of what the curriculum providers require, but having it only available from one entity has been a problem in the past, and it could be a problem in the future. It's just generally not a good idea to have a monopoly. I have talked to people who preside over different training in multiple states across the country, and they tell me that in other states, if you are a sponsor or maybe a group of sponsors in a geographic area or any other type of grouping, and you have a bunch of rider coaches that you need to get, rider coach candidates that you would like to become certified, you pick up the phone and call a certified instructor in that curriculum and you negotiate a class with them. They say, yeah, I'll come provide you a class. I need X number of students. I can do it on these dates if you can provide a facility, and they just get it taken care of. That has not been the case in Texas, and it is part of the reason why we have so few rider coaches. And it's one of the things that I think right now, as we're discussing this, we should seriously consider. The health of the program is directly related to the number of rider coaches we have, which is directly related to the wait times for training, which is directly related to people going out and riding without training and without licensing. So there's the way that it's done in other states that we can learn from. We can take the good and leave the bad from that. There's the fact that it's a monopoly, and that doesn't help making courses more available. I see in the statement of work that there's a minimum of 8 participants required for the training, and I understand that sometimes for the training that's required to have a critical mass of people, but other times it's not. And the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, I know, will perform some of their certification classes without a minimum number or with a much lower minimum number, as long as you compensate the instructor of the course for that. And I really think that if we do, my bottom line is if Texas provides the training, which I think is great for Texas to provide the training, that we also have the ability to seek training from outside of the Texas organization, as long as they're certified by the curriculum provider. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. David?
Presiding Officer Ravel, this is David Gonzalez, TDLR. So this is the candid feedback that we need to hear. You have an agenda item before you. You have a statement of work. Some of the questions you raise are the same questions that we've been wrestling with. Some of the items that y'all bring up, they're statutory mandates of contracting with TEKS and TTI. But if there are things that we can explore, things that y'all have experience with, that y'all know have been points of contention in the past, these are the things we need to hear, and exactly the reason why we're consulting with the advisory board. So there is an opportunity. Derek, I don't want to step on any toes. If you'd like to go ahead and interject, I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. And I appreciate all the board's comments up to this point. The department's main goal in this is to comply with the law as it's given to us. And so as we continue our discussions, I just want to point out that the statute requires that this instructor training program be administered by TEKS. And now that's the law that we have to go by. And so, I'm open to any suggestions. I appreciate the concerns that have been raised, and I'm open to any solutions as to how we can fix those problems and still comply with the law's requirement that this training program be administered by TEKS.
Thank you. TDLR Advisory Board member Keith Rovell. I'd like to address something I think is a very serious matter in this statement of work. It is in the Texas Transportation Code that the NHTSA standards for entry-level rider training be considered for any curriculum used in the state of Texas, and in fact is in TDLR's own rules, section 98.112 under curriculum standards entry-level course, that the minimum curriculum standards for an entry-level course are the Model National Standards for Entry-Level Motorcycle Riding Training distributed by the U.S. Department of Transportation National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which the department adopted by reference. I note here on item 3 that in the first section, they will use the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's rider course curriculum for a period of a year. I have been looking into this for the last 6 months, contacting various organizations, including NHTSA, Claro Research, the SMSA's, Society of Motorcycle Safety Administrators nationally. There is concern and actually proof that the current MSF basic rider course does not meet the National Highway Traffic Safety Administrations. Indeed, I have a letter here that was written by Jeremy Gunderson, the highway safety specialist with the DOT, that was sent to all people involved in the Claro research. And the first line of the second paragraph says, "We realized no single vendor met all the standards." Now, to that point, I was able to reach out to the vendors and to SMSA, and we discovered that they reported to us that the MSF declined to acknowledge the report and declined to modify their curriculum to meet the standards. In light of this, I believe it places the state of Texas, TDLR, the instructors, and the providers at grave legal peril if we move ahead with this, since we're in violation of both the transportation code and TDLR's own rules. This is something that is going to have to be handled before we can even consider any additional comments or movement on this. And when we get toward the end of the meeting, we'll talk about maybe some work groups. But I think until that is handled, we have to possibly just table this for right now. The other thing that we're dealing with, and Chris, I wanted to bring up something that you talked about, is reciprocity. If we create our own curriculum in the state of Texas, it will take time for it to be analyzed and evaluated by NHTSA to see if it meets these standards. And then it will take time for the other 49 states to evaluate it and see if they will accept people that have gone through this class for licensing. We are creating a tremendous bottleneck that is not going to serve either the residents or the riders or the state of Texas well. And I yield the floor. Jude?
Jude Snyder, Rider Rep for the advisory board. Mr. Burkhalter, if this does move forward, can you let us know what the time frame might be and how the advisory board might be contacted that it is moving forward?
Well, because this is the instructor training program, we want to get this in place as soon as possible so we can begin training instructors to move into the industry. We certainly want to keep the board updated, but we can't discuss it, outside of an open meeting with a quorum. And so one possibility that does exist is that we can assign a work group of less than a quorum to be designated to advise us on the contract as it moves forward and help us craft language that the work group is comfortable with. But there is an urgency to getting this in place because we do want to get instructors into the industry.
Well, I certainly understand urgency, but the devil is in the details. And truly shelving in the entire program that's probably one of the most effective in the state or in the United States in order to go to something that's less effective that may cost the lives of riders. I just can't stress that enough. In the interest of expediency, I just don't see that. So the devil's in the details, and I certainly would volunteer to be on that working group.
Mary Winston, TDLR, I'm gonna hop in right here, and thank you all for your comments. Okay, this is, we put this out for you. It's dissimilar, but it's virtually the same process. Earlier when John Medlock was talking about the enforcement plan and the penalty matrix, we come out with something and we're looking, and then we come out to you and we ask for your expertise and input. And based on the conversation thus far, we've talked about Jude, you've talked about the old way, your concerns. Chris, you've talked about also your concern of becoming a monopoly. And Mr. Ravel, I know that you have concerns about NHTSA. So there are likely other concerns that we've haven't necessarily been voiced in this meeting. Now, the agenda item F does state consultation on the proposal. Typically, when we appoint a work group, of course, appointing the work group is the advice of, it's under the advice of the presiding officer. You can pick whoever you want to as long as it's not a quorum. We typically put that on their appointment of work group or possible appointment of work group. Under consultation on the proposal, if this is what derives from this conversation, I think that would be a fantastic thing to do. I want anyone else, before we move forward, to get out and voice your opinion because we have several things. And I know this is recorded, but I like paper. So I'm writing as I'm listening, and it just helps me, keep it all in perspective. If someone else wants to present something while we're on camera, please do as part of the discussion, because at this point, we'll move from the public entity of discussing on camera to we can't have a quorum. Anything we do that's not in the public is going to be something smaller than a quorum of this group. However, that small group's opinion is always brought back to the full group for further discussion. We do want to move ahead, and there are some constraints that, as Derek has voiced already, that we're just required to do. So before moving forward, I want anyone else, if you have something else to add, to please do so now.
Yes, Kyle McNew.
Thank you, Keith. Kyle McNew with Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service. Gentlemen, we started down this path, as you all know, starting September 1st. We've been impacted by COVID. We've had some discussions. Again, we don't know what the input is from the advisory board. So as we try to get a statement of work ironed out and finalized to meet the requirements within what the legislative mandates are, as well as working with TDLR, understand that we're still trying to develop and figure out what this thing, just like you guys said, we're trying to figure out what it looks like. Keith, I heard your comment about no single vendor meets the NHTSA standards, which obviously is of great concern to us also. Having been in vehicle training and worked with NHTSA over the years, I get that. So yes, we've got some work to do, and so we don't know. Again, I will say this: your input is going to be important to us. We don't know what the final product looks like at this point. We do understand the same angst that everybody else has, is that we've got to get trainers out there. We've got to get people out there training. One of the things that was said earlier, I think, just a second. Chris, I think you brought it up. You were concerned about minimum numbers. I saw that in the statement of work, and I know we've been working on the backside. And I think that minimum number has been and moved for that same very reason that you talked about, is not having enough people. I think we're talking more about a specific number of courses being delivered a quarter. And again, we're still in that discussion phase, but I think that's important that we understand that we're not necessarily looking at a number of person. We're looking at getting some schools put on, because I know trying to get people into classes is hard, and then it hurts even worse to have that class canceled. So I feel exactly what you're saying, and that has been a discussion that we've had with Derek and the guys at TDLR. So again, what I want to say is we're open to the input. We want to hear what has to be said. We want to make this thing work for the state of Texas. And again, we're still trying to figure out what it looks like. How do we meet those requirements, Keith, that you bring to the table, the NHTSA standards, et cetera. And we want to make this easy. We don't want to make this more complicated than it is already, because it can be quite complicated. And you're right, Jude. You've mentioned the fact that there are multiple curriculums out there, and we just have to look and see what's going to fit for Texas. And we need that input. So I want to say that this discussion is good, and I look forward to the after discussions of the work group and the workings of and being able to work within that work group and figure out what that path forward looks like.
Thank you, Kyle. Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. Yes, Rick Wyatt. Did we lose Rick?
No, I'm just hitting a lot of wrong buttons. Rick Wyatt, TDLR Industry Rep. Couple questions. It was brought up earlier, especially on the RIMS things, that we are not reinventing the wheel. So why are we trying to reinvent the wheel on training? As Keith and Chris and Jude brought up, it definitely, as not only as an industry rep, as a coach and writer, it seems like we're trying to do that. It says the TEKS has to administer the program. Could that be as simple as overseeing contractors, as Chris's statement said. An industry rep through Harley actually has numerous instructors that offered several times to come to the state of Texas to offer courses for instructors and was shut down every time by DPS. Why? It's the same course. The materials that an instructor receives straight for MSF instructor comes from California, from the MSF. There is no Texas changes to it. So again, reinventing the wheel and making it more difficult and shutting people down. We only have about 300 some odd instructors, motorcycle instructors in Texas. What was our numbers before the curriculum change? Over 600, 700, and we've lost over half. We're shooting ourselves in the foot on this. We don't change it, it's going to get worse. MSF, Total Control, there's a few other programs. Those are the two I'm familiar with. They work. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We can improve, I agree. But if trying to rebuild it from the ground up just to make it Texas, I disagree. And then a big point is funding. Is this coming out of the dedicated funding that we've been paying into as writers, or is this tax dollars, or what? So, thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Chris?
I'd just like to touch, Chris Litvin, TDLR Advisory Board. I'd just like to touch on one thing Rick said and ask Mr. Burkhalter that question that he touched on. The language in the law actually says that TEKS will, quote unquote, administered by TEKS for the training. What does that mean? Does that mean that they have to implement the training, or as Rick touched on, does that mean that they can certify or oversee or schedule or administer other third-party trainers from within or without Texas to train Texas rider coaches? That would be my question, is like the legal definition of what administered by means. Thank you.
Derek Burkhalter, TDLR, and I appreciate that question, and it's a very good question. And the bill does not address the definition of administer. The statutes do not. So, you know, we have to look to the common meaning of that phrase. So, you know, if you look in the dictionary, there are quite a few definitions. You know, it could mean provide, it could mean manage or oversee. So, you know, I think we need to take a look at what you've mentioned and the possibility that it could just mean oversee. And does that allow for the ability to do the training through contracting that's approved by TEKS or something like that? I think that's you know, that's an interesting possibility that we need to take a close look at.
Thank you.
Yes, who else at this time with comments, please? Mary, did you have a comment?
I did, and then I hit the wrong button, but I got the right one now. Sorry about that. This has been fantastic. I wanted to let you know that under agenda item F, consultation on this proposal, further consultation is going to move forward by way of work group. Mr. Ravel, we have 9 members on this board, and we cannot have a quorum, so we need 4 folks for this work group. And this will fall on you, sir.
All right. Do I do that now, or do we do this after the meeting?
You can actually do that now, and then we'll know this we'll put a pin in this just for a very short moment so that we can go on to the next agenda item, and then staff will contact the work group. The work group will meet through this same platform, I'm sure,
Okay.
and then we'll bring this report back, whatever the work group finds, and continued work by TDLR folk. And Anna's telling me that appointment of a work group is not on the agenda, which is true.
Yes.
And so I'm carrying it on as part of the consultation. So further consultation is going to continue on this, which means this will continue also for next meeting in some form or fashion, and we'll word that for you. But further consultation will occur by way of work group. And so if you could do that now, we could then put this little pin on this so we can get the work group started after the meeting and continue with this issue.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to, this is Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board Presiding Chairman. I'm going to ask Jude, Chris Litvin, Mike Manzer and Rick Wyatt to please be part of this board. Will that be acceptable, Mary?
Yes, sir. That is your call, and we are Mr. Deputy Executive Director Mike Harris Mendez, I believe, wants to jump in here.
Mike.
Mike Harris Mendez, Deputy Executive Director. I want to first of all thank you for all your conversation and this discussion. You know, it's always difficult when we move from one entity to another, and this is one of those that we're having here. We're having growing pains. And I understand the concern that you have, and I believe that Chairman Revelle has appointed a work group to look at this and be able to suggest changes in the future. Chairman Revelle and I have had this discussion in the past concerning the letter that he mentioned and the concerns that were being had in reference to the question that was asked about the funding and money. We found out after the bill that we were not given authority to tap into that money. So the funding that was put in place that is on the contract that you see right now for TEACH, and then the other one that will be in the next agenda item for TTI, that's coming out of the funding that we received. We received appropriations for the motorcycle safety, and so what we at TDLR are having to do is we're having to take that money that was appropriated to us, and we're having to divvy it up between TDLR, TEACH, and TTI. And so the money that's sitting in the motorcycle fund, no one has access to it at this point in time. So I do want to make that clear to everyone. I would also state that as Mary was talking about consultation, the work group will be able to provide feedback on what any possible changes may occur in the future concerning the contract with TEACH. But and I can't stress this enough, this is a consultation item. We need to move forward on this item from the TDLR and TEACH standpoint in order to secure that contract, put it in place prior to October 1, or actually on October 1, so that we can begin this process going forward as based by law. And so while we are looking forward to the information that we received back from the work group, we just want to let you know that this contract will be moving forward. We brought it before this board, Motorcycle Safety Board, to make you aware of the contract and make you aware of what's happening. But this, along with the other contract that we'll be looking at with TTI, we're looking at moving forward with that. And any changes that we have on the contract will be coming out of the work group that will be established, that has been established and worked together. So I did want to put that out there on those two issues on the funding aspect, because it was actually asked about the motorcycle fund. And then the other issue of the contract moving forward, the way that the law is written, it's based on a consultation basis, which we're consulting with the motorcycle board. There's concerns about it, and I understand that. And that's the reason the chairman has put a work group in place. And so we look forward to feedback that we'll get from this work group in order to be able to allow us and help us modify the contract down the road as we get there. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Keith Revelle, TDLR Advisory Board. We have a comment from Jude.
Jude Scheck Snyder, Rider Rep Advisory Board. Mr. Harris Mendez, do you know, or can you tell us whether or not TDLR will be seeking an exceptional item request this fiscal year, or actually during this legislative process, to try to be able to tap into General Revenue 501?
Yes, we are trying to seek to, I'm sorry, Mike Harris Mendez, Deputy Executive Director for TDLR. That is one of our items that we're pushed forward to try to be able to have access to that, to be able to expand the funding available for the motorcycle safety throughout the state of Texas.
Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Lipton, one second. Thank you so much, Mike, because those were two of the big questions that were before us, was the funding. So this kind of gives an explanation of that. Also, we love all of the suggestions and the input, and I just want to remind everyone that Mike's correct, of course, that we are under legal time constraints, so that we are not going beyond that authority. We do want input as much as possible, but for now, we are going to operate under what we are required to do by law, and in the future, moving forward, things Could change, but they are as they are at this moment.
Okay. Yes, Chris.
Chris Lipton, Motorcycle Advisory Board. To what Mary said, and a question for Mike, as a newly appointed member of the working group, and then I just heard Mike, I heard you say that we're legally obligated to enter into a contract with TEEPS by October 1st, and checking my date, it is October 1st. What does that mean? Does that mean that our work group is going to be academic, or that it'll be for the next contract, or does that mean that you're going to start the process and it doesn't mean you're going to sign the contract, and all the, as Jude mentioned, devilish details will be defined? What is the actual deadline as to when that final language will be done? I mean, is there an opportunity for us to meet and provide feedback before the details are contracted and signed?
Mike Harris Mendes, Deputy Executive Director for TDLR. The details that you see before us has pretty much been negotiated already with Keats. We've had numerous conversations with the administration group over there at Keats and TDLR. Some of the group members that you see here, myself, Mr. Burkhalter, Mr. Gonzalez, Mr. Strawn, and also Mr. Pizarro, who's the Director of Enforcement, have met with Mr. McNew and his group over at Teats. We've had this conversation, went into detail. So while I say October 1, that was the deadline that we're shooting for and try to get into place. We may have a couple of days in there that we could probably be able to adjust. But what we're looking at is any changes coming out of the work group would be in the ability to be able to change that contract. This is for a one-year contract. And so we'll be able to make those changes, and we can always go in there and amend the contract if we find that we're able to maybe find something that is amenable to everyone involved with this contract. We can always go in there and amend it.
Okay, thank you. That was going to be my follow-up question. Would there be the opportunity to amend the contract now? But when you say amenable to all folks, once you get that contract signed, if the people at Teats are not amenable to changes, then they have a veto right, because they're one of the two parties that signed the contract, right? So if they don't agree to the changes, then it won't be changed for a year. Is that correct?
Well, I would hope that we can all come together to find a contract that's amenable to everyone.
Oh, I would too, but that doesn't answer the question.
Yes, I know.
Great.
No,
Thank you.
And Mr. Lipton, I apologize. What we're looking for is the ability for the motorcycle safety industry, to be safe. I mean, that's what we're after here. We want all motorcycle riders to be safe, the instruction that takes place in that to be safe. And so what we look for is to find something. Now, we can tell you this, is I was told a long time ago, if everyone walks away from the table not completely happy, but you have a contract in place, then it's a success. And that's what we're probably going to having to look at here, is that not everyone may get what they want. There may be some legislative changes that have to occur. But if we can amend the contract that is amenable to everyone, then we'll move forward with that contract. And if there's changes that have to be made from a legislative standpoint, then we'll just have to wait for the session to occur in order for those things to happen.
I appreciate the constraints that we're under legislatively, and I appreciate the constraints that you're under time-wise, but it doesn't seem like the advisory board even had a seat at the table in this respect, because the table's already done.
Well, and it's unfortunate that this motorcycle safety board didn't actually come into fruition until September 1, but yet the programs had to be implemented rather quickly, and that's where we have the time constraint. So, the unfortunate part, it was a timing issue for the board to be able to come together, and then also for this program to be put in place and up and running, and for these contracts to be implemented. And I understand what you're saying, Mr. Lipton. I really do. It's unfortunate, but there was just the dates and the stars did not align in this particular case.
Okay. Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board Presiding Officer. Just for clarification, may I ask who authored and who is involved in the writing of this statement of work?
Mike Harris-Smith is Deputy Executive Director. This was done through a work group from TDLR. Mr. Burkhalter was in that. We also have our Deputy General Counsel and our General Counsel that were involved in this contract, along with Director Ray Pizarro and, of course, Ford. that you, or I'm sorry, Michael Strong. I think Derek has some other ones he wants to mention.
And I just want to clarify, we were involved in a discussion before the proposal was sent, but TDLR did not have a hand in drafting this proposal that you see before you. We did have discussions as to how we interpret the statute and what would need to be included in an agreement, but we did not have a hand in drafting the terms of this proposal.
So it did go through general counsel for review. And so that was where we came at.
Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Kyle, Mr. McNew, again, Keith Ravel, TDLR Advisory Board. Who on the TEACS staff was consulted and provided input for this?
Keith, the Kyle McNew with TEACS, the people involved, myself sat on that group. Dr. John Ray, the division director there at TEACS, Scott McCullum, and also John Young, who works for TEACS now, was present, as well as it had to go back through our contracts office here at TEACS itself.
Very good. All right, are there any other questions? Yes, sir. Mr. McNew.
Keith, I want to go a step further. I realize you've got your work group appointed. The only thing that I had some concern about your work group is it really doesn't provide much of a direct pipeline for us to provide any input or to work closely with those guys and answer those questions. So it may be a kind of an awkward process where the work group works and brings back stuff to us, but I don't think it provides an easy avenue for access for developing something or adopting something forward. Just my observation.
Keith Ravel, TDLR Advisory Board. Mr. McNew, what would you suggest?
I would have thought possibly we would have had a seat at the work group so that we could provide direct input and answer questions and be a part of that discussion. But again, that's your call as the chairman.
Mary?
Mary Winston, and I'm so sorry for because this group is honestly, we love all of our advisory boards, but I've been told by staff that this has been a group that everyone wants their industry to be a great industry, but this group has been just exceptional coming over and really wanting the safety of Texans. And that's unsolicited from me or anybody. So we appreciate that. Because of the time constraints, that's why we're just moving this way. And there are legal time constraints. There's another one I have to throw into the mix. Mr. McNew, you have to be excluded from this whole process. So we can't even count you in that number. I initially said 4, and I've been instructed by my general counsel's office offline. Thank you, Derek, that for reminding me. It will really have to be 3. And as Mike just said, though we're moving forward because we're required to by law, these things we're doing what we have to do at this point. Input is not all for naught, right? It is necessary as we move forward. We already had questions about next session and what's going to come forward. And you guys are literally 1 month into this, even though we did have a meeting to begin the process and the training process. So I just wanted to add that in. Sorry, Mr. McNew, I think you knew that, but but I have to limit your number again. So the input that you provide, even if it can't be done right now, 1 month in, we still need that input. So I wanted to jump in to clarify that number. Thank you.
Okay, Keith Ravel, TDLR Advisory Board. Based on what you just said, Mary, so we have to trim a member off the advisory board. Just one. Just one.
Mr.
Yes,
Wyatt is waving, so we want to get him.
Rick.
Rick Wyatt. TDLR industry rep. I would graciously yield my spot since I'm just the industry rep for the motorcycle and leaving you, Mr. Lipton, and Mr. Schneider as the subject matter experts in that. If it works for everyone, I will yield my spot on the advisory, on the work group.
Thank you, Mr. Wyatt. We appreciate that. Mary, is that acceptable? It is. Very good.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute button. Yes.
All right. Are there any additional questions or comments on this agenda item before we move on? Delia, yes.
Can you give me the list of the members, work group members again for this item?
It will be myself, Jack Snyder, and Chris Lipton.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And what are our time constraints on this? May we meet in the next week, the next 2 weeks? Are there boundaries we have to adhere to?
There, you can, as soon as we can gather, Derek had his hand raised, so I'll let him go with that one. Derek?
Well, we don't have anything set in stone as to this must be done by this date. It's just the urgency of the industry. So I would suggest that, we have a meeting with the work group as soon as possible, because we would like to get this contract in place as soon as possible. And just a point of clarification, Mr. McNew may be involved in these discussions from TEEX's side of the table, which is why we want to be careful to only include 3 members of your advisory board, because when you add that to Mr. McNew being involved on TEEX's side, that will effectively be 4 members. And so that's why we need to limit it down to 3.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. TDLR Advisory Board Member Keith Rovell. Any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay. Next item on the agenda.
And I'm sorry.
Please. Yes, sir.
Just in the interest of transparency, what you had before you was the initial proposal provided by TEEX. There have been back and forth discussions and negotiations and possible edits of that proposal between the 2 entities. And so just again, in the interest of transparency, I'm putting that out there. We have tried to make as much progress as we can in the meantime until we could have an opportunity to consult with this board. But I just wanted to make that clear.
Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board, Mr. Burkhalter, then will we be able to have a copy of the amended statement of work that you just mentioned?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say there's been an official amended version. There have been suggested edits exchanged back and forth. So I can't point to one document and say that this is an amended proposal. The work group would certainly be able to be involved in those discussions and those suggested edits and give their feedback. And we certainly look forward to that input from you.
Very good. Thank you. Chris, you had a comment?
You had my comment, Keith. Chris Lipton, member of the advisory board. Derek, whatever you can give us would be, even if it's not official or approved or completed, would help us. If we know where the people who are authoring and negotiating the contract are moving, we'd be interested in understanding that when we make our suggestions as well. More information is better. Thank you.
Yes, Mary.
Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Rovell, I know that also you were reading from a document referring to NHTSA, and I don't know if everyone has that document. So if we could get that as part of just that discussion, it would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. And if I might add another document onto it, I was able to get from the SMSA, from Brett Robinson, the executive director, and Mary, I will provide this so that everybody can see it. A review that they did of 3 of the curriculum that we had discussed before, and 3 of them that they evaluated did meet NHTSA standards. One of them that we are currently doing in this state is Total Control, based out of California, and that one did meet the standard. Just want to make that point of reference.
Perfect. Typically, if we were in person, we would just run out, get a copy, and switch to the board. So thank you for making that available.
Yes, it will be sent out immediately after the meeting. Okay, to the board members, any additional comments, questions before we move on? Okay, it is 12 noon right now. Is it appropriate at this time to ask, does anyone need a break prior to moving on to the next agenda on the board meeting? Okay, we have several people that need breaks. Suggested time length, I may ask, do we need 10 minutes? Do we need 30 minutes? What would you like? 5 minutes? Let's take a 5-minute break. It is 12:01. We will resume with the board meeting at 12:06. Thank you. Keith Rovell, presiding officer, TDLR Advisory Board. The time is 12:08, and the meeting is back in session. We are moving on now to item G on the agenda, which is consultation on the proposal to contract with Texas A&M Transportation Institute, TTI. Once again, Derek Burkhalter, the Assistant General Counsel, will present the agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Again, I'm Derek Burkhalter, Assistant General Counsel assigned to this program. And so now we will be addressing agenda item G, the consultation on the proposal to contract with TTI to conduct research of motorcycle safety and provide advocacy and education to the public pursuant to the Transportation Code's requirements. Similarly, as I warned you in the previous item, as you know, Mr. Manser is here as he's a member of the board as representative of TTI as the statute requires. But this is an agenda item concerning a contract with TTI. And so, again, I'm just sort of making clear that his participation will be taken and any statements he makes will be received by the department as being made in his capacity as a representative of TTI and not a member of the advisory board. So with that, again, we are, the department we are not taking a position on this proposal. We are just here to seek your feedback based on your expertise. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Presiding Officer, to recognize anyone who needs to make comments.
Okay, in that regard then, do we have any comments on the proposal at hand? Has everyone had a chance to read it? No questions? Mike, did you have any input on this that you wish to bring up?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to just spend just a couple minutes talking about kind of the process that we went through at TTI to arrive at what you see in the proposal. But I also want to emphasize that I would very much like to hear feedback from the Motorcycle Advisory Board about other options that we should potentially put in here or items, maybe a little bit of change in direction. So with the proposal that you see, we went through some preliminary steps. One is to revisit the actual Senate bill language, Senate Bill 616 language. And that language is actually very broad for TTI's involvement here. It just says we're going to conduct, we can conduct research, we can conduct education and outreach, and we can conduct advocacy. And I want to be clear on that advocacy term. It's not advocating for a particular political position or anything like that. It's advocating for safe riding or advocating for improving safety for motorcycle riders. So that those three elements within the Senate Bill 616 language provides almost an exceedingly broad range of activities that we could conduct. So what we tried to do is narrow down our activities. So we really wanted to, number one, focus on topics that are germane to motorcycle safety issues in Texas. Number two, we wanted to focus on topics that were germane to the motorcycle and ATV operator group that we have, right? This is part of the TDLR program. And we wanted to make sure that any activities we did had a direct line into helping to improve rider safety, particularly trying to reduce the number of fatalities and reduce the number of suspected serious injuries with riders. We went through sort of a brainstorming process to identify a variety of topics that we thought kind of met those criteria. We then went through a sort of a rank order process, and I'll give you just a quick insight into some of the other topics, excuse me, that we considered. The first topic is the topic of trying to recruit additional instructors, which you see before you. A second topic relates to trying to encourage new riders to get their M endorsement. So we know that training is one of the best things you can do to help improve rider safety. It provides rudimentary training on how to handle your bike and operate its controls. It provides training on hazard perception, which is critically important in motorcycle riding, and a host of other topics. Another big issue in Texas is related to licensing, but it deals more with riders who are now what we call riding dirty, which is they don't have an M endorsement, but they continue to ride their motorcycle. We know that from the data, almost half of all rider fatalities, those riders do not have an M endorsement, which likely means that they not receive the basic training to help them operate their motorcycle, help them to identify hazards and stuff. So what we did at this point is we've gone through those topics and we said, well, which ones can be reasonably addressed within a single year project or kind of a multi-year, kind of a building up of projects, and which ones are really being addressed elsewhere. And we know that the M endorsement topic is currently being addressed by TxDOT. So we really want, and I think that's really going to be a great program. So we want to just kind of stay off of that for now and look at how successful they are. So we really looked at the remaining two. One is the instructors, trying to bump up those numbers, and two is trying to encourage new riders to get licenses. And our logic here was that we have an incredible deficit of the number of instructors in Texas. And if we address topic number two, which is trying to get more people to take the basic rider course, class, intermediate, and advanced classes, if we don't have the instructor base there yet, what's the point of trying to get more students to take those courses? It's just going to lead to greater frustration. So that's the rationale for why we settled on trying to increase the number of instructors throughout Texas. The plan that you see before you is a template from several different projects that we've conducted for TxDOT in researching motorcycle safety issues in the state of Texas, and then having that data lead into the development, the formation, and the deployment of an educational and outreach program. In this case, it's just trying to recruit more riders to become instructors and to try and retain the really qualified instructors that we already have. And I'll leave it at that. Are there any preliminary questions? I will say, it's just one final note. Again, we're more than happy to change this up. Chris Lipton had mentioned a couple items earlier this morning. One about access to classes. One about there needs to be good information about the classes. The times need to be convenient. The locations need to be convenient. Those are all really important factors in trying to get instructors to take these courses, or get riders to take the courses to become an instructor. So that's all part of our research process as well, is to go out and identify what are those critical issues for riders and what are the barriers, and then identify what are the processes we can do on the backside to help remove those and just make it easier, because that, trying to go and fill a gap of almost 200 rider instructors, rider coaches, that's not an easy task. So we really have to take a look at all the options on the table and come up with a good plan. So, okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll quit talking. Any questions?
Any questions for Mike? Chris?
Mike, I was just, Chris Litvin, TDLR Advisory Board. Mike, I was just curious as to, from the data, what percentage of your problem domain or the area you're concentrating on is split between on-road motorcyclists and off-road ATV, and what percentage of your time and budget will be focused on each? Thank you.
Yeah, Michael Manser, TTI representative. So we were assuming that all of our effort would be focused on motorcycle riders. and converting them. Right now, the ATV issue is, at least in my opinion, is not as significant and severe as the rider coach issue. So 100% of the resources would be dedicated to trying to get more riders to become coaches and trying to retain existing coaches. And I know I'm using the term coaches and instructors and all that interchangeably, so please excuse me on that point.
Okay, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. Mike, I have a question, and this really is in light of what we just discussed in the prior agenda item. If we are looking to totally change the curriculum in only a year, how are you going to be recruiting people right now to become instructors when in a year they're going to have to go through an entire instructor process again?
Yeah, this is Michael Manager from TTI. That's a really important question. I don't have a good answer except that we need, on our side, on the TTI side, on the contract side, we need to be flexible in how we approach this so that if there is a change, as you mentioned, that we can continue to really tailor our approach to try and get riders into whatever training program is available. I do think that question of training programs should also be included in our research component to find out, if you're a new rider trying to get in, and if there's a change in the structure of the program and how you become an instructor, does that detract from your interest in becoming an instructor? That's something that I think we need to include in there as well.
Okay, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. That is something that happened last time, as was mentioned by Chris and by Jeff and a few of the other folks as well. We lost about half of the instructors in the state with the last curriculum update. So it is a major concern. It really is. Chris?
Yeah, I would just echo that. I mean, I've been through several curriculum changes now, and you'll have someone contact you very interested in becoming a motorcycle rider coach, and they'll say, "What's the next step? What do I need to do?" And you want to tell them, but you can't because the system is in flux, and the old system didn't have any rider coach preps available, and the new system hasn't been defined yet. And a lot of times, you need to strike while the iron is hot, and for whatever reason, they're very anxious to become a rider coach right now, and a lot of times they're not in 3 to 6 months. It could be that they weren't really right to be a rider coach anyways, if their interest was so short lasting and fleeting, or it could be that if we'd have gotten them in at the time, they might have really enjoyed it and enjoyed contributing and giving back to the community, but we'll never know. And this isn't, it's no one's problem that we're in flux. That's just the way it is right now. But I can tell you that it's definitely, and I think you can do a lot of groundwork and legwork and figure out how you want to tailor your message and attract rider coaches. It just may be a little early to put it out yet until we have the answers to those questions. Once we catch those people, we really want to be able to follow through and let them know what they can do to take the next steps. Thank you.
Okay, Mike?
Michael Matzer from TTI. Yeah, Chris, that's a really important point. I will add that, there are some other challenges that we're trying to address with this project as well. One is traditionally, there's not an overarching program across any state to recruit new instructors. It typically falls on the schools or the rider to approach a school or something like that. So as part of our process, we really need to work with the current providers to say, how can we partner together? So if TTI begins to develop this at an outreach program to try and recruit new instructors, how do we best coordinate that with the providers themselves? So that's a part of this project. The second point I'll make is related to the instructors. You mentioned that a potential instructor will come to you and say, yes, I'm really interested, and 6 months later, maybe the interest wanes. a part of our project, part of that research side, is to identify what are those underlying rider-related factors that motivate them to become a rider instructor. And we think that on our side, we think that those are more long-term, more permanent characteristics of people. They're interested in teaching, or they like the extra income, or they're just very enthusiastic about safety. Those are the types of characteristics that we're trying to uncover and identify in the research phase that we can then use in the actual outreach program to kind of really target riders and target those riders who are interested in teaching, or target those riders who want to make a couple extra dollars on the weekend, or those so we're trying to infuse those underlying reasons into the actual ed and outreach program.
Yes, Chris.
So much good stuff there, Michael. This is Chris Litvin, motorcycle and there's always been a three-way relationship between the schools, the instructors, and the state of Texas. Sometimes the state of Texas, holds us responsible for what the instructors do, but then the instructors report directly to the state of Texas. So it's always kind of confusing, and those rules have changed a little bit over the years with how to become a rider coach and go through the certification process. But I definitely agree 100% that to be most effective, there needs to be a system and communication and coordination between your outreach program, the candidates, and the local providers. And the first obviously thing that comes to mind is just geographic location. If there's a way, if you catch fish, that you could make them available to the riders in the geographic area that they would be most likely to teach for, and there'd be some kind of handoff for that. And to your other point about the characteristics which are important to know about with someone who wants to become a rider coach, absolutely, everything you said is true, but sometimes there's characteristics and attributes outside of that. For example, a lot of times the reasons why people's interest may wane in becoming a rider coach, but a lot of times it's not that their interest wanes. It's that at the time they were interested, they had a particular job, and maybe 6 months from now they have a different job, or they had the same job and they had a void in their personal responsibilities where they wanted to fill that with rider coaching, and they decided to become a Cub Scout leader, or teach a class at a community college, or do all sorts of other things that would get back to the community. And that void is no longer there. They don't have that opportunity. We missed that opportunity in time for their resource. So there's a lot of different things there. But yeah, that's why it's so important for if you have an effective outreach, for you to communicate and for us to cooperate with you as providers of training, so that we handle that transition, and also to allow them to know what the next steps are and move forward, and not to take too much time, but to talk about what we said with training. In the statement of work for TEKS, it says something like 4 training classes a year, all in the same place, with the opportunity to add 2 more. That's just not very many. We're down 300 rider coaches, and you have 4 classes. So I mean, if you catch an opportunity, a person who's interested, and you hand him off to me, and I work with him, and we put him through the class so he's up to snuff on what the program is like, and then we send him to however we implement training, and we find out there's no classes available because the next one a quarter away is full, and it's 400 miles away for him to drive, and it lasts 5 days, and he has to take time off work and get a hotel room. Then that defeats all of your good hard work and my coordination with you if it's so onerous in time and money and effort wise for the individual to get that training, when there's a possibility for a solution to be more tailored to the demand, to whenever we have enough demand in a geographic area, we could schedule a training, and that training could be more geographically local to the candidates, so that they might not have to at least get a hotel or travel, even if they did have to take time off work. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mike Manser again from TTI. Yeah, I agree 100% on all those points. That's all information that we need to pull out of that kind of the research phase and include in whatever program is developed. And that coordination between the providers and TTI in this case. And there also needs to be some coordination with TEKS on their training side. So we're trying to address a fairly complicated problem. I have no illusions that this is going to be solved in 1 year or even 2. I mean, trying to fill that gap and do it in a way that's efficient and expedient is not an easy task. But I think we're definitely up for it, and I know that providers have a strong interest in this as well. So I think it's a good project to do.
Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. Mike, personally, as a provider, I'm very excited by this, that we will finally have a state program put in place to try to boost the instructor corps and not leave it up to just chance. One thing I would like to make sure that is included with this, as I'm sure it will be, is that we have efforts out there to get a more diverse instructor corps than we have. For instance, in Houston, we have 177 languages spoken. We need people that are multilingual. We need people that can relate to people of all kinds and across the state. And certainly when you look at recruitment materials and all, I would hope that you will look into not just the old areas we've always used, so we wind up with a bunch of guys that look like me. So we can get some new people. And that's all I had on that. Any other comments?
Chris Litvin, Motorcycle Safety Advisory Board member. Amen, Keith. Michael, I'm sure you will. And just the only thing I'm sure you enter 100% agreement with, we also need more women. I mean, people of all different walks of life, people who speak all languages, and absolutely we need more women rider coaches because a growing percentage of our customers are women. And, it's just human nature that sometimes you relate to people who have similar experiences as you have. And I think that would go a long ways for the motorcycle safety program in Texas if we could encourage in the outreach material to get that more diverse rider coach population. That would help us be more effective in training people to be safe on motorcycles. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Jeff Alford, advisory board member. We also need to look into having younger people be involved in this, as the average age of a rider coach isn't getting any younger. They typically work less and less. This is a retirement job. It requires so much of your time and effort that you have to put into initially get certified, and then to remain certified, and then to become further certified into additional curriculums as we progress, that it basically eliminates everybody from being able to update or do any additional training. Because right now we're going to be so focused on bringing new rider coaches on that we're going to forget the current staff that we have now as not being able to update them to get their additional certifications they need to become as diverse as I need them to be to continue to be on my schedule. So we need a little bit younger coaches out there because most of these people, as you all well know, don't do this for a living. They do this as a hobby. So even if I have 30 coaches and I have 30 openings in the schedule, I'm going to have 24 unfilled classes because everybody teaches once a month or less. I got coaches that I have to bring in from out of town. I'm now having to pay for them to come up to see me. I get coaches from the Austin area that drive to Dallas. I get coaches from West Texas that come into here because they don't offer that curriculum and they want to stay current on that curriculum. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Any, yes, Mike.
Oh, Michael Manser from TTI. I was just acknowledging that. Yes, I agree 100%.
Okay, are there any additional comments, questions, or anybody about the TTI proposal? Very good. Thank you. All right. Well, we are at the point in the meeting when we talk about recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. So this is where we can bring these things up. So I'm going to ask all of the board members for any recommended items for our next meeting. Delia will keep the list. So we've opened it up now for recommendations for our next meeting. Chris?
Chris Litvin, Motorcycle Advisory Board member. Two things that are on top of my mind. It sounds like TDLR has done a good job of jumping on the MSB8 issue and getting MSB8s available and having a smooth handoff in that. But I'm curious to see how we are going to deal with replacement MSB8s and MSB8Os. Personally, I don't know that we have much need for MSB8Os. At my school, the only O's we do are in the military, and they have a different certificate, and that'd be a whole other question. But we do issue a fair number of replacement certificates. And if we're going to continue to issue replacement certificates, we're going to need replacement certificates. So I know that's not nearly as important as the main MSB8s we use, which was critically important, but that's going to be the next level. And the suggestion I have for an item, again, getting new rider coaches is most critical, but shortly followed by that is approval for new ranges. We need rider coaches every day, but every year we need to replace ranges that go away or change or are redeveloped. So we've talked a lot about finding and how we're going to train new rider coaches, but I haven't heard any discussion of what the process is if I have a new range that I need to have certified.
Yes, Jude.
Jude Check Snyder, Advisory Board Rider Rep. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put on the agenda for our next meeting that we have further discussion on where the current curriculums are, MSF and total control, are relative to the NHTSA standards, and how this board will need to move forward in making determinations whether or not we continue those particular curriculums based upon what they are relative to the NHTSA standards, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. And again, I will, Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board, I will be sending out the documents that we discussed today at the end of the meeting so that everyone has them.
And just to clarify on that point, Mr. Presiding Officer, we would ask that you provide TDLR with those documents. So
Yeah, yes, I will be sending them to advisory.boards at TDLR, and you will be dispersing them.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other additional, Rick?
And Rick White, TDLR Advisory Board. Just to piggyback on to on Jude, can't say your name. Any way we could extend invitations to representatives from the MSF and total control or for input, or is that allowed? Or would that be public speaking? Or I would like to hear from their side as well if they're going to participate in our state. I yield.
Okay, next, Ford, did you have a comment?
Michael Strawn, TDLR. Yes, I wanted to address the range question that was asked just a second ago. On our website is actually a new range application. If you go to the motorcycle page on the right-hand side, that'd be an area that says forms and applications. If you go to that, under schools, there is an application in there. And so you'll fill out that application, send it in to us, and we will work with you to get that new range approved.
Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Michael. Chris Litvin, Motorcycle Advisory Board member. Thank you, Michael, for that information. I'll check it out. I appreciate your work on the website. It's changing and growing daily, and that's a good thing. Once I fill out that form, what does that mean as to how it's accomplished? I knew how that worked in the old system, and now we have a new system. So is someone going to come out and look at my range, and who would that someone be, and what kind of time frame are we talking about?
Michael Strawn, TDLR. So once you submit that to us, it goes to our Education Examination Division. We have a group over there that processes all the school applications. I could get you a timeline on how long that will take to get that approved.
And Ford, I'm sorry, Ford. I'm going to jump in here. We can address your individual situation offline, perhaps. We'll have staff contact you and address your specific situation. But because this wasn't on the agenda, we don't want to go too far into that discussion here today.
And thank you, Eric. That was kind of where I was going. Sorry.
Yes, right. At this time, a reminder that we are looking for agenda items for the next board meeting. So add that on there as far as what to do with that application. Okay, Jeff?
Thank you, Keith. Jeff Alford, board member. I got a list of items here that be addressed in the next meeting, just to get the official answer on, more or less. Previously, DPS regulated range aids, putting them through a background investigation. I know that Ford and I have gone back and forth with this, and he's working on something, but I wanted to bring it to the board so it's officially set up and done. Also, it's been said that I brought all the things up to the board. So range aids, what's the official process? How do we add them to RIMS if they're no longer going to receive router coach identification numbers so that they can be run as officially on the class and in the course? That's what was covering them from the MSF side as far as liability. The forms updated from DPS to TDLR, since we repeat Department of Public Safety several times every time we read these forms, so they must be read in class according to the old DPS standard. Conflicts with old standing policies and the current website. We talked about this, about like the 8-to-1 certification, the standing anywhere. Now the website says if you've conducted so many classes, you're automatically converted, but who adds that to the RIM certification? The course fees, I understand that that's in change right now or is no longer regulated. I need to find where that has been published out to the sponsors. And the process, I know this is in flux with who's going to conduct training, but adding additional certifications such as your 8-to-1 certification, your Basic Riders Course 2 certification, your Advanced Course, Total Control certifications, Harley-Davidson certifications. Who's going to have to come out and inspect these things? Who's going to need these things going forward? As this is the questions that are on the coaches' minds, and how do we move forward since this program we did it with was mostly just email based and word of mouth. Where is it going to be written? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else? Yes, Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Ravel. We want to put on the agenda, and I know that Delia's already working on it. We normally have standing work groups, and so be prepared to do that for next time.
Thank you. Chris?
Chris Lipton, Motorcycle Advisory Board member. I'd just like to take my request for new ranges off the list, since it sounds like it's already been addressed, and we'll take care of it offline. Thank you.
Anyone else for this item on the agenda? Anything that we want to add for next meeting?
Rick?
Yes, Rick.
Rick Wyatt, Motorcycle Advisory Board. Would like clarification or for rider coach recertification. Currently, there's no forms, especially the driving history. Just need some clarification on the process. Personally, I'm coming due for recertification within 47 days and yet to be notified of it. Luckily, I know my own date. And I'm going through the process, and it just says but that's it. What we need clarification for coaches, especially there are several coming up for research soon. Yield.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, then. Basically, we're at item I. We're going to be polling the board for the next board meeting. We are looking for suggestions for the date and the time of the next board meeting. I'm assuming that we will need to do it again virtually. Is that correct? It is. All right. So I think we know the place, but do we have any input or suggestions for times? Yes, Rick.
As most of us are in the motorcycle industry and our general days off are Sundays, Mondays, I would suggest a Monday, and I'm flexible as to time. I would think a 30-day rotation, so the first of the month might be our best unless we need to meet more often. I yield.
Other input, please. Yes, Jeff.
Thursdays are the days that I'm not coaching, as I coach on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those are typically my days that I'm coaching. So any Thursday, business day works good at any time.
Okay. Other input? How about duration out? Delia, do we have any kind of a guideline as to how often these meetings should occur, since this is our first one?
Well, it depends on, I know we're going to have all these items on the agenda. I can meet with staff and see what time frame for the next board meeting. Mary can do that as well.
Yes, I'm going to jump in. Yes, we are. I know it is. I can't believe it's October, but we're jumping into the holiday season. So we want to get in there before that. We already have meetings scheduled going into November. So possibly into December. So let us poll you to see if we can get you in within a 30-day window. But or if it's 35 days. Because at this point, it's about logistics and scheduling. I've taken notes, and again, it's recorded, so we know that who's having issues, maybe what days, and if we give you enough of a heads up, hopefully you can plan accordingly. So if it's okay, we would just like to poll you and try to get you in within 30-45 day period. But honestly, our schedule, we have 32 boards and another work group. So we are getting everyone scheduled before end of year as much as possible. But we want to fit you in, but we will contact you. Delia will contact individually to see what the availability is. We'll come up with 3 dates and we'll reach out and start there.
Very
Yes,
good.
ma'am?
Yes, Delia?
And please keep in mind, we also have the holidays coming up, so a lot of people take off.
All right. And just again, for my purposes, as far as scheduling the work group that we will be doing, you will send out a notice on that. Is that correct?
Mary Winston here, my computer's actually delaying. I guess it's tired. But yes, we will reach out to you. That's a smaller group. And Derek, I'm not sure if you're going to be the direct person reaching out or someone will reach out and schedule that work group.
Very good.
And that will happen. That's easier to do. It's just a few folks. So we'll get your information. We'll gather information on this side and we'll get to talking. So that'll happen pretty quickly.
Excellent. Keith Rovell, TDLR Advisory Board. Is there anyone else that wishes to provide input on our next meeting as far as date, time, anything like that? Well, I want to thank you all. We've done a stellar job. Look at this. It's 12:45 and the meeting is adjourned. We will announce, please hit the red X on your screen to leave the meeting. Thank you for everybody to being a part of this, and I'm looking forward to the next one.